Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs podcast. I'm your host, George Kerth, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, I don't think there's a lot going on today, so happy Mario Day.
Yes, happy Mario Day. I saw the Cowboys re-signed their long snapper, but outside of that, not much to talk about.
Yeah, no, I don't know how we're gonna fill however much time we decide to be on today, but we'll talk about it. Plenty to talk about, really. So make sure you're tuning with us. Thank you for coming back and watching us live. If you are watching us live here, we're on Thursdays at 6:30 during the off season, but obviously special Monday with the free agency tampering period opening today. Just a little disclaimer on this episode: we're not going to hit everything that's happened in today or whatever, but if there's any moves you want us to talk about while we go through, feel free to drop them in the comments. We'll chime in and we'll try to hit as much as we can before we get off the air. And obviously, if any news breaks while we're on the air, we'll let you know as well. Make sure you're following us at the Couch GMs, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok to get even more than you do from the show. All right, Cody, how do we start? Might be hearing a lot of that today. Right before the show started here, we heard the LA Rams are planning to cut Cooper Kupp at the start of the new league year if a trade partner is not found. And I mean, this is probably a trickle-down effect thanks to them signing Davante Adams. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, we've known that the Cup situation was a long time coming. McVay, their GM, they have not been shy about, like, we love everything about Cooper, but we know it's time for us to part ways. Didn't really leave the door open to many options. And then not even waiting because Davante Adams was cut, they go out and give him $23 million per year to pair him with Puka Nacua. So I guess the big question mark: who wears 17 in LA this upcoming season?
Is 7 available? Would Davante Adams do 7? I don't know what 17 means to him.
I think so. He wore 15 in college, but 17 has kind of been his ultra. It's part of his brand, DA17. He has it tattooed on his neck. I would have to imagine that Puka gives up the number, but maybe we're looking too much into that, and we don't need to spend too much time on jersey talk with so much other news happening. I don't know if you saw, right as we hit live too, the Miami Dolphins have a new backup quarterback, which always plays into fantasy and all that. Zach Wilson gets a 1-year deal with the Miami Dolphins. So if Tua happens to go down this year, Zach Wilson will be the guy slinging it to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Yes, he will. I mean, they have had the worst backup quarterback. I don't want to say luck, just, production in the NFL over the last few years. And Tua being the slippery slope that he is, you don't know. You obviously hope he stays healthy, but the concussions scare you. It's nice to see somebody in there that hopefully can get a little bit of production if he does happen to go down.
For sure. I mean, I don't know how often you want me to hit this bumper, if it's only big news or whatnot, but the Vikings, they're signing Ryan Kelly, center from the Indianapolis Colts, to boost their offensive line. The Steelers are agreeing to terms with Malik Harrison. So this is kind of just like a little bit of what this show is going to be like. If there is a little bit of gap in what's happening, we can talk about some of the big moves that happen today. But George, is there any that just stick out to you, or like biggest surprise? I know it's a loaded question with everything that's happened so far.
It's a loaded question. There's so many things that have happened. I guess one of the biggest moves that happened today, Washington trading with Houston for Laramie Tunsil. I know there was a second and third round pick that changed hands in that trade. And Washington is really hitting the accelerator on trying to get some pieces around that team to be a contender. And when you look at that compared to the Eagles pretty much just losing players today, they're positioning themselves to be a contender in the NFC East.
They definitely are. They making moves. They're on that Rams mantra of, forget about those picks after the Marshawn Lattimore trade, trading for Debo, now trading for Laramie Tunsil. You have to question. I mean, Laramie Tunsil's still one of the top left tackles. Like, what does that mean for Houston? And CJ Stroud was already running for his life. What are they going to do to come in and replace him is a big question mark. And then the other big news, I think, is Sam Darnold, the first quarterback to fall, goes to Seattle, 3-year, $100 million deal. I know some people think that's an overpay. I think it's a good value in terms of the quarterback market. I mean, you get Dak Prescott at $60 million or Sam Darnold at 33.
Mm-hmm.
What it's a kind of the going price for a middle tier quarterback. It's still less than the Giants paid Daniel Jones.
That is that the benchmark now on overpay or not overpay? Is he paid more or less than Daniel Jones was?
I guess that might be the benchmark on.
With how much, yeah, with how much the market has blown up at quarterback, I feel like that probably is a good benchmark. I still have question marks on how good Sam Darnold's going to be. If it was a flash in the pan year, you saw he still has his weaknesses because, obviously when they put him under pressure, put him in the situation in the key and regular season or playoff game, he just kind of crumbled. But we're also looking at the comparison to what they had was Geno Smith, and Geno Smith probably wasn't any different than what we're looking at with Sam Darnold. They're going to hit a refresh button, see if they can get even more ascension out of Sam Darnold when you kind of had Geno Smith just like, this is what we have. We know what we got now. It's not going to be enough to put us over the edge.
Yeah, they go a little bit younger. Some people might say it's an upgrade or a lateral move, but this is kind of the contract extension they offered to Geno Smith. He didn't want to take it. They turned him into a third round pick as they traded him to join Pete Carroll, former Seahawks Raiders, go after and get Sam Darnold. I don't think it's a sign that this team's tanking. I don't think it's just we're going to go a little bit younger and see what we can do there. They still got to address that offensive line. But I mentioned Sam Darnold is getting traded from the Seahawks, but DK Metcalf also getting traded from the Seahawks to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Instant reaction to that one.
That was the big wide receiver move that they feel like they've been trying to make or they've been missing. Because I mean, obviously they have George Pickens, but George Pickens has been, kind of disappearing at times. He's been dealing with some injuries. They obviously need somebody else to be a pass catcher there. So going out there, getting DK Metcalf, that solidifies it around whatever quarterback they end up settling on in free agency or the draft or wherever it ends up going, to try to continue to keep themselves as a contender. The biggest thing that I worry about in there, and I mean, I saw Twitter threads going around and everything of like, the attitudes they have in that locker room now, and it was like how many times you've seen DK and George Pickens get into things on the field. Hats off to Mike Tomlin if he can keep those guys in line because there's a lot of personalities now on that team.
And another two people that will be fighting over a jersey number between Pickens and Metcalf, both over 14. Or not, they're definitely over 14, but they wear 14 as well. But the big question around Pittsburgh is who's going to be the quarterback, right?
Yep.
Like that is going to be the big question. And we saw that Justin Fields is going to the New York Jets. He's going to be the starter there. He got a pretty decent payday, so it seems like he'll be the starter there. So it doesn't leave many options for the Steelers if they want to go the Daniel Jones route, if they want to re-sign Russell Wilson, or if they want to go in on the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. So where do you think the Pittsburgh Steelers end up going?
I'm still going to stick on I think they're going to stay with Russell Wilson like they did last year. If they wanted to try to stay younger and get somebody who they think could ascend, I think that's where Justin Fields would have come in. Fields already had some success on their team. They were 4-1 with Justin Fields there. So I think he would have been the guy that stuck with if they would have tried to go younger. Now at this point, when they're building up DK, I know they also signed or expected to sign Darius Slay. So they're trying to go to a win now mode, which makes sense with how close they were. They're going to go out there and get a veteran quarterback that, can step right in. And I think at that point, you're better off sticking with Russell Wilson, who knows the scheme, has been there for a year, rather than trying to go to that 1 year Aaron Rodgers and hope for the, miracle one run.
But my counterpoint to it is because I'm really fascinated by this situation. And because I have some, friends and family who are Steelers fans since we're here in Pennsylvania, and they've always given me a hard time about Aaron Rodgers. Seeing him in Pittsburgh would be a lot of fun for me. But I am intrigued because I do still think even today, Aaron Rodgers is the better quarterback between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Some people might not agree with that. And if there was already talks about would Mike Tomlin get traded this offseason. If they're going to go in, they just went and got DK Metcalf. If they're going to try to go all in, I would want the best option. And to me, the best option on the free agency market left would be one Mr. Aaron Rodgers. So that's where I'm kind of hoping that the Pittsburgh Steelers go. And that'd be great if that broke sometime today, what we're talking about. But, we've gone a couple minutes now, and I don't think any big news has happened. So we can
I
keep going through
have
the list.
one move here. Bengals trying to solidify their defense did sign former Eagles linebacker Oren Burks to a 2-year, $5 million contract. Nothing crazy there, but Bengals have been trying to make some moves on the defensive side. Good to see them actually cash on somebody.
Definitely. The Bengals have been making, some small moves. They brought back PJ Hill. And that's another big question mark. They put Trey Hendrickson on the trade block essentially. So does he get moved? Does he get flipped? Where might he go? I think a lot of teams could use him, but the problem is now we know he's going to want a contract extension, and he's going to want that Max Crosby, Myles Garrett type money after leading the league in sacks. And as we get deeper and deeper into free agency, that money pool washes up a little bit. So, maybe a contender gets a steal because they get him on a 1-year deal and worry about the contract later.
Especially because that there's no way Cincinnati's going to be able to pay all three of Chase, Hendrickson, and T. Higgins. So somebody's got to give. Right now, it seems like Hendrickson's going to be that guy. I know you still seem to have a feeling that Higgins isn't going to be there next year, but if he does get moved, I don't know if he's going to get that mega deal right off the bat. You're right.
Yeah, it'll have to be waiting and seeing. You just talked about Miles, I don't know why I said Miles, Oren Burks getting traded. Not the only Eagle to leave today. Two kind of key pieces, especially in the Super Bowl along the defensive line. Milton Williams, everyone thinks he's going to the Panthers, flips last second to go to the Patriots on a monster deal. And then Josh Sweat rejoins Jonathan Gannon out in Arizona. As an Eagles fan, even though they're your number 2 team, which one's the bigger loss?
I'm thinking with the build of their team, Josh Sweat's probably the bigger loss. They were at a bigger need at edge because now with looking at it, we don't know if Brandon Graham's going to come back or not. And they lost Josh Sweat. Their starting edge rushers right now are Nolan Smith and their 3rd round pick this year. I'm not even remembering his name. He did get a sack in the Super Bowl, but
so I obviously don't follow the Eagles as close as you do, but I know last year during this same exact time, they made the splash of, trading Hassan Reddick and to the Jets and then signing Jets pass rusher Bryce Huff. He didn't have the best season.
He barely played.
Was that all injury, or is that a guy that could, potentially have a bounce back after the contract that they gave him?
I feel like there's a chance he could have a bounce back, but I feel like there's actually more of a chance he's an underrated trade candidate. When I say that, not going to get a lot back for him. Like the Eagles have to move him for a 7th or something like that, take the cap hit because he still is owed a lot of money over the 3 years I believe he has left. But not a lot of people are talking about the fact that the Eagles, I just don't think he fit Vic Fangio's scheme. And it was kind of a miss from the Eagles front office there that was covered up by the fact that they had such a good pass rush with everybody else. And then had the breakouts of like Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt's the other name of the guy I was trying to think of. So, but I think there's probably a better chance that he is either in a similar role to this year, just kind of eating up that money, not being super effective or in the game a lot, or he ends up on another team as kind of a low-key move that not a lot of people have mentioned.
No, I like that as a name to continue to watch. Another name, when we did our show last Thursday, you talked about being a dream fit for you, was the safety Hufanga from the 49ers. You mentioned the Cincinnati Bengals. He did not go there. He went to another ARN team and the Denver Broncos. He got a nice payday. So wrong team, but a guy that might make an impact on that defense as they continue to, they surprised everyone and made the playoffs last year. And now they get to, keep going with another sure secondary in there. You like that fit?
I do like that fit. I mean, he's already joining what was for most of the season the number 1 pass defense in the NFL, but he's also kind of that big hitter guy who I think can help play in the box and shore up some of that run defense too. So young team, kind of ate all that cap last year, have some space to work with now. Some guys that are going to start coming into their own, they could end up being a contender or somebody who can at least put some pressure on some of the top teams in that division, like a Chargers and the Chiefs coming up in the next year or two.
For sure. Another one I
Your
wanted.
dream fit, man.
What's that?
Your dream fit.
Mr. Paulson Adebo.
Yeah, man. He ended up going to the New York Giants.
Yeah, only on a $10 million per year. I know he did have a little bit of a down year before the injury, got injured. But so I was surprised that when it was only 10 mil, he because he was so young, he didn't opt to go the 1 year route, or he signed so quickly. But I guess the Giants paid up, and I think honestly, for a front office that people get to make fun of, Paulson Debo is a good fit for any team, like I mentioned. But I think I like it in New York. But you want to know a guy we didn't talk about on Thursday, but unfortunately, I think it's an underrated signing that I love the potential fit.
Mm-hmm.
Elijah Mitchell of the San Francisco 49ers headed to the Kansas City Chiefs as a pass catcher, complement to Isaiah Pacheco. Like, I feel like he's going to fit that scheme so perfectly, and he won't have to be the guy when CMC's hurt to become that bell cow. He would like to, potentially stay healthy because he's not getting as many carries. So I definitely think Elijah Mitchell to Kansas City might be an underrated signing of at least day one for me.
I agree. And it's somebody who I didn't even really actually realize was out there on free agency just because we had a lot of bigger names out there. One of them already hit. I'll talk about him next, but they needed a pass catching back in there now because Samaje Perine was signed back to Cincinnati, which is where he was in the early part of his career. So Elijah Mitchell steps in, immediately fills that role. Cincinnati signing Perine makes me think that they're going to ride with Chase Brown and use that and the Perine as a split, which I think is probably the right move for them at this point because Chase Brown really did break out last season.
Yeah, Chase Brown had a really, good season, so I completely agree with you. But you mentioned you had another guy you want to talk about?
I did. So the top running back on our list of running backs in our last episode was Aaron Jones. Before free agency opened, it was reported he is staying in Minnesota, signing a 2-year deal. So exactly like you thought, Aaron Jones back to Minnesota seemed to make sense. Minnesota agreed and puts pen to paper there.
Yeah, I think it makes a great fit. He got a little bit more than he got last year. He had a career high in rushing yards. He's a big part of their success. And whether it's Daniel Jones, J.J. McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, or named to be yet determined, who is being the quarterback there in week 1, he'll definitely help that guy out.
Definitely agree there. Buffalo wide receivers was something I was keeping an eye on as we started going through here. And a guy who was getting a lot of buzz kind of under the radar was former Chargers wide receiver Josh Palmer. He lands in Buffalo to be that supplementary number 2 right now after they signed Khalil Shakur to his extension last week.
Yeah, I like the Josh Palmer fit. He's a big play guy. Josh Allen has a big arm. I think he'll fit in there great with, let Shakur kind of be the guy that works. He has some speed, but he's more of like their intermediate guy. I think they'll bring back Mac Hollins for like their big bodied wide receiver. And then they'll have Palmer as like a stretch the field kind of guy. So I think when they're building the pieces, I like what Buffalo's doing.
And you didn't even mention the fact they still have Keon Coleman, who obviously was a lot of draft hype. They hope they can get even more out of this year if he can stay healthy on the field. So it seems like Buffalo is going to stick with a similar formula to what they had last year, not going out and getting the stud wide receiver, but getting a lot of solid guys to go around Josh Allen.
Definitely. Some other names to talk about, just to like recap. One of my favorite ones of the day was when I got the Braxton Berrios signed a deal with the Texans. I'm like, yep, that's everyone's top free agent we were all thinking about. But he's back to the Texans. Jimmy G is back with the Rams. Javon Kinlaw, he got a pretty big contract with the Commanders as well as they continue to beef up everything. And then we talked about it, but Hassan Reddick, who we mentioned in the Bryce Huff move, he is going on a 1-year deal to Tampa Bay. I think going there with Todd Bowles and that scheme will work really well from him. Maybe he can start to regain some of that, value that he missed out on last year. Although he did get a 1-year, $14 million deal, so good on for him.
Yeah, no, I think he cost himself a lot of money by doing it the way he did, only having to take a $14 million deal when last year he was looking for that 20-25 range. But going to Tampa Bay, it's a good defense for him to be set up for success in, and we'll see if he can have a turnaround season.
I just been wanting to hit that bumper when something happens. Not a huge player, but the Giants are retaining Darius Slayton on a 3-year, $36 million deal. So he is not going anywhere. Chris Godwin, we didn't talk about him yet. He returned on a 3-year, $66 million deal. So a lot of like the true free agents haven't moved a lot. There was a trade, there was Devontae, but a lot of these guys are, returning to their own team. And I mean, we talked about it. It wasn't the best wide receiver free agency class to begin with. So not too surprised to see not a lot of movement.
No, and it's also then not surprising to see that there were so many trades of the big guys. Like the teams that wanted the big splash for wide receivers this offseason were, the Steelers who traded for DK and like that.
For sure, for sure. I mean, there's so much moves and stuff happening going on.
Another recent move here. We had former Chiefs defensive lineman Tershawn Wharton signing a 3-year, $54 million deal to go to Carolina. So Carolina, after they missed out on Milton Williams, has been trying to make a few moves today.
No, they did, and I forget they signed J.C. Horn to the highest paid defensive back. That's one of their own guys, but it's still a signing. Another thing that just popped across, not in a signing but a visit. Former wide receiver Michael Gallup is attempting to make a comeback, and he is now visiting the Commanders. He would know some of the people that came with Dan Quinn from his time in Dallas, but that could be a solid number 3 option for them as well. So if he can make a comeback, so that'd be one to monitor as we move forward. Some other names, if you're a Jags fan, they got Jordan Lewis from the Cowboys, slot corner. The Chiefs shore up their offensive line after trading Joe Thuney last week and getting Jalen Moore, who was the left tackle that replaced Trent Williams for the 49ers. So that seems like a good move. And then the Bears went out and made a splash with Drew Dahlman at center as they continue to upgrade that offensive line. So those ones. And then the 2 big names, Aaron Banks, guard from the 49ers as well, signed a 4-year, $77 million deal with the Green Bay Packers. And then Dan Moore Jr., offensive tackle from the Steelers, 4 years, $82 million with the Tennessee Titans. And that one caught me off guard because they just spent a top 10 pick on left tackle J.C. Latham last year. So I wonder if he moves to the right side or how that's going to shake out. But I think one thing's for sure is we've seen the Eagles and the Lions as they've gotten better. You got to win in the trenches, and we are seeing these teams go all in on trying to build those up.
It's definitely been a big offseason for offensive and defensive lines. Offensive line, it seems like in trades, there's been so many of them, but some guys making some money. I wanted to stop back to the Panthers just really quickly. Some of the other things that they did re-sign Andy Dalton to be their backup quarterback for 2 years. And then they actually got our top safety on our board, Trayvon Moehrig, for 3 years, $51 million to keep shoring up that secondary. And then they also got Bobby Brown, another defensive tackle.
Not the top safety. Javon Holland's still the top safety.
My bad. I think he was number 2.
Yeah.
Bad.
It's all good. I don't disrespect my guy, Javon Holland. I don't know why. Just one of my favorite players in the league. One of those weird, really liked him coming out. And now enjoy rooting for him when he's not playing against my team. But yeah, so I know we're hitting these kind of quick. Is there any that you want to go back and talk about, or maybe in terms of fantasy, how they play out?
I guess there's a couple on here, one on here especially. I don't think we hit. I think we missed it. Browns quarterback situation. Obviously, they're still dealing with the Deshaun Watson cap situation. They traded with the Eagles for Kenny Pickett, moving DTR and a 5th-round pick back to the Eagles. That just basically solidifies that the Eagles' backup quarterback is going to be Tanner McKee next year. But for the Browns, I'm thinking that means that Kenny Pickett's going to get another chance to start in the NFL in the same division that he started out in. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get the best out of him or if it's going to be a stopgap before they can go to find another quarterback in the draft or free agency next year when they have a little bit more cap flexibility after the Deshaun Watson money starts to come off the books. But we know they're still tied to Deshaun Watson for a long time here. Cody will be back in a second, but in the meantime.
Nope, I'm right here.
All right.
I heard you talking about it. Yeah, the Kenny Pickett deal. Definitely one that was interesting for sure. Shout out to him, being an Eagles fan, getting the ring with them, and then now he's going to go get a chance to start because of the Deshaun Watson injury. And this was kind of like like you mentioned, the type of move that they could do because of that contract for sure. So definitely interested to see how that plays out, especially since Kirk Cousins doesn't seem like he's going anywhere. They're going to keep him in Atlanta for sure, unless something happens between now and the draft. But that was a good pool as another trade because it's hard to keep track of all these moves as they're being made.
Exactly. And like we said before, if there's any moves you want to hear our any of our thoughts on, or if anything happens while we're on the air and we miss it, feel free to drop it in the comments. We're here to just talk football with you guys for a while. You mentioned Michael Gallup and Darius Slayton. I think we're caught up over there. How about back to tight ends? There wasn't a real big tight end market, but Mike Gesicki is going to stay in Cincinnati. He signed a 3-year deal. He really cashed in after having the best year of his career last year.
I just thought it was interesting that he had a press conference to announce the re-signing.
They must really like him there, I guess.
Yeah, that was the whole point of that situation of what's going on there. So, but yeah, he's back, and they wanted to try to keep the band together as much as possible. So, I guess that included him as well, for sure. But
that's an if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of offensive move right there. And then I have one more thing on my list, and then we can go back and just kind of react and talk some fantasy or whatever. Khalil Mack back to the Chargers, a year and $18 million. I don't know if he would have gotten $18 million on the open market if he didn't go back to LA.
I think he would have.
Okay.
He had a really his sack numbers were low. He only had 6 sacks last year. He was PFF's 5th highest graded edge rusher last year. He was solid against the run, just an overall good player. I think he would have gotten a big contract. Maybe he took a little bit more because of the taxes or something like that versus going to play in Florida. Maybe 16 million would have got it. But I think that is kind of a no-brainer. I was hoping that he would come to Green Bay. But yeah, that's kind of some of the big names, like you mentioned. I'm sure we've missed them. There's some guys that are going to get released, and the Browns talked to or notified defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson. He's a name that we talked about in the past. Free agencies, he's going to get cut on Wednesday. But so while we wait, I mean, we could talk about some guys, but let's also talk about some of the top remaining free agents, and maybe we have some dream fits of where they go now. But I'll just read a list of them here. Javon Holland, we talked about. Aaron Rodgers, we kind of hit on. Stephon Diggs coming off the injury. Where will he go? Keenan Allen, same thing. Then Byron Murphy and Chase Young, 2 names I want to mention because they have some value here. And this is one of the weird quirks about the whole, and I don't even know if you've realized this, is because of, you've heard of void years on contracts in the past, right?
Yep.
So how they're technically on contract until that void date hits, and then it accelerates that date. Well, both of their contracts, their void date doesn't hit until tomorrow. So although they're in pending free agents, they're still technically on the team today. So they're technically not allowed to be legally tampered with. So Byron Murphy and Chase Young will probably be the quote unquote big names for tomorrow once they are eligible to, are no longer technically on a team.
That's the kind of insider couch GM knowledge we need, Cody. So thank you for dropping that. I was interested to see if those names are going to fall today. But yeah, no, that because we already talked about on our last show how much we expect Chase Young to garner a lot of interest and could sign a big contract, meaning the fact that he's only 25 years old and now he proved he can play a full season healthy for I think maybe the second time in his career. So he's definitely going to be a big one.
Yeah, and then another name to talk about, Najee Harris. He's out there. He's probably the best running back available. Again, not a strong class, but I saw someone mention the Chargers, and I was like, they're going to lose J.K. Dobbins potentially.
Yep.
Get a little bit younger guy behind that offensive line in that system. I think that would make a ton of sense.
It fits their scheme completely, in my opinion. So I think that would be a dream fit if we're going to have a dream fit. And then somebody else who I know, he was released by San Francisco and he's a little bit up there in age, but Javon Hargrave has been someone who's signed some big contracts. He's a free agent right now.
He
Interested to see if
signed with the Commanders.
Oh, he did. I missed this.
No, that's Javon Kinlaw. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. My bad.
I was gonna say I looked this up before the show.
Dang Javon's.
Javon H. So Javon Hargrave, defensive tackle. Well, interested to see if he signs a big contract for a year or two going somewhere else. I think there's even a chance that he can go back to Philly since they lost Milton Williams and need some defensive line help.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad option. Go back, kind of do like a I don't want to call it ring chasing, but doing that similar path because to replace Milton Williams, get a little bit of depth, familiar face, would not put that past one Mr. Howie Roseman at all. I'm just trying to look here to see if there's any other free agents names worth mentioning or talking about or seeing how we're at here. Again, I know we kind of flew through this whole situation. Ronnie Staley.
I got something for you here, actually, before you get too far. If you want to hit your favorite bumper.
Oh, hang on. Didn't have that up.
Let me just lead this off with, there is a fantastic photo of him on Mike Garfolo's Twitter page. So if you guys are interested, go check it out. Patriots agreeing to terms with somebody who you thought was going to be staying in Buffalo, Mac Hollins, 2-year, $8.4 million deal. So Patriots trying to shore up some wide receiver options around Drake May.
Oh, interesting that and I looked up the picture as well. So Mac Hollins goes to the Patriots. Good for him. Gets a little bit gets a reunion with Josh McDaniels, as much as that is as good as anything. But he's a tough, gritty guy. He fits the Mike Vrabel system for sure. Also, don't know if this means anything. NFL also tweeted out, I'm not going to hit the breaking bumper news, a picture of Stafford, Nakua, and one Devontae Adams, and they have Adams in a 15 jersey. So, again,
possible that's just what they settled on already.
Could be.
So we have a little bit of time here. Why don't we talk about some of these wide receiver moves, the teams around them, and how we think it affects fantasy for next season?
Sounds good. And then I did want to mention before the breaking news, Ronnie Staley, he was an offensive line that I forgot off my list, but he's returning to Baltimore, but they did lose some offensive linemen as Bozeman went to the Chargers and Macari, the team is now blanking off me. I should have not closed out of the tracker. Where did he go? I don't know, but he left. I will look that up while we talk about the wide receivers and the impact on fantasy. And I think the one we got to start with is Devontae Adams, because I think at this point in his career, although I think Devontae Adams can still be elite, I think he could still put up I think Stafford could support 2,000-yard receivers. I think he should be looked at as the wide receiver 2 behind Puka Nacua.
Definitely. Macari to Jacksonville, just tie up that knot before we move into this fully. Yeah, I agree. I think Puka Nacua is still going to garner the same target share and the same value that he had last season. Devontae Adams takes a step down, as obviously we were looking at him as a wide receiver 1 going into last season, even though he was on the Raiders, which was a bad team. Now you can look at it as he is the number 2, should garner a lot of interest from Matt Stafford, as it's, I think, going to be a little bit of a different kind of target for him. We're used to Cooper Kupp, the shifty guy in the slot. You have Devontae Adams now. He can do a little bit of a different thing. He can, catch the jump ball. He can still do some things in space, but I think he's a good complement to Puka Nacua. I think it gives the Rams offense a boost in general, especially if he can stay healthy as he has in the past, as opposed to like Cooper Kupp has been struggling with that for a lot of his career, actually.
No, I think that's the main reason why they're moving on from Cooper Kupp is the injury history and struggling to stay healthy over the last couple of years. Don't get me wrong. I think Adams could, and obviously I have some bias to me, but when we're talking in fantasy perspective, I do think Adams does have, some solid fantasy value as we get into the mock draft season and we start seeing him, round 4, 5, and 6. If you take your running backs early, maybe try to sneak in a top quarterback, and you can get a guy like Devontae Adams, knowing the type of player he can be. He had 1,000 yards last year with, for half the season, subpar quarterback play. and then not much better with Roger started a decent season, but it wasn't what we were accustomed to uh, for a guy that Matt Stafford who likes to throw the ball, McVay likes to throw the ball. So I think he could be a sneaky pick. And then the other interesting name in terms of fantasy for me is Chris Godwin. I'm kind of surprised to see him go back to the Buccaneers. Obviously, Mike Evans is still there. Jalen McMillan had a little bit of a breakout, and he's coming off an injury. And it sounded like he turned down about $20 million to not go to New England, to stay in Tampa Bay. So with the rise of McMillan, I don't know. I know he got a decent paycheck, $22 million a year average, but I don't know if I'm super high on him with the rise of McMillan.
Does Tampa Bay, once they see that Chris Godwin's healthy, whether that's later in the offseason, during the season before the trade deadline, make a move to get some ammo from McMillan and just keep riding with the Evans-Godwin duo?
I don't think you can do that because of their ages. I don't think you, unless someone's like, I'll give you a first round pick for Jalen McMillan, which I don't think that's
Which is
going to happen.
unlikely, yeah.
Like, I don't think he's untouchable in that sense, but I mean, maybe they believe in, I mean, Godwin is still only 27 or 28. He's had a couple big injuries, though. Evans is up there, so maybe they're looking for life after Evans with the McMillan Godwin, as crazy as that seems to think.
I think that's probably actually more the way they're looking at it, because Mike Evans is over 30, 31 years old. I mean, there's been plenty of wide receivers that played into their 30s successfully, but you got to think, what, 32 to 34 has got to be the age where he starts to fall off. Hopefully he still keeps getting 1,000 yards, because that's always one of the most fun storylines when you get to the end of the season in the NFL. But they kind of do have that guy to be the successor right now. And then you pair him with Godwin, get a couple extra years out of Godwin, and then obviously looking for that replacement. They could set themselves up for the next 5 years in the wide receiver room if they play it right.
Definitely. And, speaking of wide receivers, let's keep on that. We talked about the DK trade. How does that impact George Pickens? And obviously, the big question mark we already mentioned is the quarterback here.
Yep.
But first, were you surprised by the 5-year, $150 million contract for DK? I thought that was kind of high for, like, DK is good, but I don't know if I put him in that elite tier.
That's very true, because it depends where you value DK, and maybe this is the Steelers trying to overcompensate, because you have to think they've had plenty of good receivers in the Tomlin era, but since they had let go Antonio Brown after that whole situation, have they really had anybody who's been that elite guy? Juju Smith-Schuster looked like he could have been for a time, but he never really kind of hit that ceiling. So I almost feel like this was an overpay to an extent of, like, we're going to will him into being our elite guy. But I bet you can probably name off 7 to 10 receivers who you'd rather have and probably deserve more money in the league than DK Metcalf. So I think it was a little bit strange that they paid him that much.
Yeah, and it'll be always, as always, it's a good thing to remember if you're a team and you're like, why are we paying this guy? One, you got to look at the guarantees. That's what matters. Contract structure, if you're really a nerd into all that, that's a good time as well to pay attention to. And then, when the teams can get out of it, essentially. So it might be a 5-year, $150 million deal, but really it's a 3-year, $80 million deal with, incentives and all that other stuff. So those will come out, because remember, agents want the numbers to look the best so they can get more players for future free agencies. But it does seem like we are slowing down a little bit for, the terms, the news, that it's a lot of the names are out. People are probably, going home, eating some dinner, recalibrating their board, so to speak. But there is some other names out there I think that are worth mentioning. But is there any other players you want to talk about in terms of where they went, who we might have
Actually, can I
missed?
extend our fantasy conversation one more team here? Because I want to flip it on its head now, since we have a lot more info on what the Seahawks have done now. So changing quarterbacks to Sam Darnold, DK gone, Tyler Lockett gone. You know his quarterback, you know the scheme. How much do you like Jackson Smith and Jigba? And as of today, around where do you think you would draft him?
I mean, I think JSN is going to be up there in terms of, top 3 rounds. the way he finished the last year, he out-targeted, out-caught DK last year. So that's definitely something to pay attention to.
And
We
now there's
saw
a ton of vacated targets.
Sam Darnold was, able to keep Justin Jefferson as a top 5 player. I'm not saying JSN is the next Justin Jefferson, but I think he's going to be the guy, and he's going to get the targets. And it's not going to be the flashy name, but again, if you're looking if you go running back early, or if you're sitting, honestly, he's probably going to be in that 2-3 turn kind of area. Maybe you have to take him a little bit early, but if you go running back 1, like if you go Saquon 1 overall, and then pair that with like a JSN and another quality receiver, that team's, as of March 10th, is cooking with gas.
That's a good point. I like that as a good value for him. And we'll see obviously how that starts to break out as we get into the offseason, see where some of the rookies fall and such. But I think he might be one of the biggest winners when it comes to value in this offseason, just by process of elimination around him. And you can argue Darnold at least the same level quarterback that he had. If not, you have the chance to take the step up.
For sure. And another name, we're talking receivers, small name, the Texans, they added Justin Watson. So that'll be interesting to see what he can do outside of Kansas City. He's had some big games, big moments, but how does he do in a bigger role? They added Christian Kirk earlier. We talked about that on Thursday. So that's a fun name. The Colts added Cam Bynum to go along with their secondary. Here's an interesting one we can talk about. Backup quarterback. Patriots add a 2-year deal for Josh Dobbs. And normally you wouldn't think too much about that, but the way Joe Milton played, as a rookie, you think they're going to probably go into training camp with all 3. But, if someone gets hurt down the line, Milton could potentially become a trade candidate. Not saying anyone will give up much for him, but it could be something to monitor as we get into the training camp if unfortunate injuries do tend to happen.
Yeah, I'm honestly thinking that they're using it. Milton can be a trade candidate. And I think Milton being the flashy name, you might be able to get more out of him on the trade market, especially for a team that ends up being desperate later, than you're actually going to get value from him just because of you have such a small sample size. He played a game and a half, looked fantastic, but we've also seen plenty of other quarterbacks have that flash in the pan and then not really turn out to anything super special. So he's a big name. He has a chance to make a difference. And I think you're you're using the steal. You're looking at the Patriots playing chess right now. And then you can say Josh Dobbs, veteran quarterback, not only to coach up Drake May, but be there if they do start to contend, to just kind of be someone who can try to level the ship if they end up needing him. What do we got, Coach?
Cowboys did something.
The Cowboys did something. I feel like we waited 2 years to hear the Cowboys did something.
Their fans probably just wish it was something better, but they signed running back Javonte Williams. So,
wow. Okay.
The 1-year deal. They went out and got a running back, which they needed. Probably some other people wanted someone different, but they got Javonte Williams, and maybe he can rekindle his career. He had some highlights in Denver, but definitely fell out of favor. So maybe he can rekindle something in Dallas.
I still think even with the down we are on Javonte Williams, he's better than any running back they had in their room last season. Zeke was not the same Zeke he was before. What are you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I don't know. Rico Dowdle had a pretty nice season last year.
He did, but I still personally feel like Javonte Williams has a higher ceiling than Rico Dowdle. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Rico Dowdle is gonna go somewhere and show out again this year, but I find that hard to believe.
I guess we'll have to wait and see. Some other news. I keep going through the list of stuff we missed. Not a signing, but according to SNY TV, the Titans are interested in one Mr. Russell Wilson. So if he doesn't go back to Pittsburgh or they go in a different direction, that's one to pay attention to. The Jags added Diami Brown. I think, they got rid of Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, but Diami Brown, former Washington Commander, be a nice compliment to that young receiver core and Brian Thomas. So I like that one. we're just keep rolling through here. The Steelers, cornerback Dante Jackson is headed out west to the Chargers, which probably means that Asante Samuel is not returning as well.
He's another big name that's sitting out there who hasn't quite hit his ceiling in his career, but plenty of opportunity to improve there.
Yeah, the Laramie Tunsil trade still completely threw me for a loop. I was not expecting to see that one come across
Second
at
time in his
all.
career that he's been traded in a big time trade.
Yeah. For sure, for sure.
We hit a lot more names than we're expecting to so far.
I know we're flying through. I mean, it's crazy. I feel like we just started, but we've already 45 minutes in to this thing. And I'm not 100% sure how much longer we're
Cameron Bynum to the Colts. Did you mention Charvarius Ward there as well? One of the top corners on the board?
I don't think I did because I thought we already talked about him. See, we're just getting into that name central. And if you're, listening, you're talking about all these names for sure.
That's two big defensive back pieces for the Colts, who I think have a lot of questions on offense, but they're really shoring up that defense, so they're going to be competitive.
And their division allows them to be, so that's always something
they've only got
monitor
Houston
for sure.
About, really.
And I mean, Houston is trading their offensive weapons left and right, so are not weapons, but their offensive line when that was already a tough situation. So have to see how that all unfolds.
Yeah. Man, this was a whirlwind. I feel like looking at all this today was so much, but
yeah, we didn't even talk about it. One missed Twitter not working for the first hour of free agency.
First 8 hours this morning, it seemed like.
That's true. So shout out Blue Sky for coming in clutch. Follow me there, Blue Sky at Cheesehead Cody if you want.
Or you can follow us on Threads at the Couch GMs. We have not been on Threads much, but I feel like we should start here.
We might have to. Another name we didn't talk about, Grady Jarrett, this morning got cut from the Falcons and instantly found a new home as he signed with the Bears 3 years, $43.5 million. And they also added Dayo Odegbo from the Colts to beef up that front seven. They already have Montez Sweat. They're really trying to build through the trenches. So hate to see that as a Packers fan. They're making some decent moves as well.
Chiefs wide receiver situation is kind of up in the air still. I don't want to give too many details because it's not worth it, but they did re-sign Hollywood Brown 1 year, $11 million, trying to keep some kind of consistency around Patrick Mahomes after a rough Super Bowl.
Yeah, that is worth noting as well. But yeah, so what I'm going to ask you, what's been your favorite move so far? I'll just do that right on the spot.
Do I have to go with free agency or can I include trades? I'm really not sure which I'm going to go with. I want to keep my options open.
If you want to go trades, if you want to go restart or if you want to go re-signs, I'm fine with that too. But favorite move so far?
Favorite move so far? It's honestly a really tough one. If my favorite team's move so far is probably Washington. Going out there, getting Debo, and then making the big trade for Laramie Tunsil. I feel like it's all been coming back to that trade for Laramie Tunsil, which was crazy. But I'm going to try to keep it different for this answer here. I don't know. The one I keep going back to is how the Seahawks signed Sam Darnold and were able to flip and get something for Geno Smith. So I'm going to go with that for now because the Seahawks were in that similar situation to the Steelers where it's like they're not as talented as the Steelers, don't get me wrong there, but they didn't have the draft capital to go out there and get themselves a quarterback. But they knew what they had in-house wasn't enough for it, so they were able to go out there and make a move to try to move the needle. And that's hard to do when you're looking at veteran quarterbacks who aren't wanted. Because, if a quarterback is good enough to be a contender or make a contender, it's very hard to get them out of the situation that they're in. So being able to go out there and garner draft capital for their guy and get somebody who has a chance to move the needle. I think that was probably the best like chess move that was made through this entire free agency cycle.
Yeah, that's probably a good one to
And I think
mention.
they're going to out chess the Steelers unless the Steelers say get Aaron Rodgers and get a great year out of him. But there's still a lot of question marks. Like that would be the thing that we would look back at the end of this offseason and be like, okay, or the end of next season, I should say, and be like, okay, that was a good move. But it could also just as easily be that was a waste of a season.
Yeah, it's definitely one way to look at it, and I like that one. For me, I don't know if it's my favorite move. It's just something that I'm very interested in, and that's Justin Fields and the Jets. Athletic quarterback. He looked, the Steelers were undefeated with him. They weren't the best. They weren't an offensive powerhouse, but they were undefeated with him before they turned it over to Russ. He has chemistry with Garrett Wilson from their time in college. I think that's probably played a factor to him going there. And I think it's just, we don't expect a lot from the Jets this year, and maybe no expectations and just letting them be a fun team. Maybe Fields can do something. And honestly, if Fields becomes something, that'll always stick it to the Bears. So I'm going to say that's been one of my favorite moves so far.
So a lot lower expectations on the Jets this year, even though I guess there have been some pieces. I'm just thinking back to 2 years ago. They had that young defense that was hungry and they were all over the place. They were one of the best in the league. And I know there's been a lot of pieces that have kind of left from that team. Bryce Huff's gone in that time. DJ Reed just left there today. But they still have Garrett Wilson. They still have some of those people on that defense. Like, you did change and take a step down at quarterback and you had a rough year. Should there be at least kind of higher expectations than you're making it sound?
No, it's New York Jets. And let's remember, 2 years ago was Aaron Rodgers is coming. They have this young defense. Aaron Rodgers played 4 snaps. That was when the expectations were high. It wasn't the year before Aaron Rodgers. It was once Rodgers got there and then only played 4 snaps. So
It was the year before Aaron Rodgers I was thinking of more with their defense because they were a top 5 defense in the league.
but that was the year the defense broke out. So there wasn't expectations.
Yep.
That's why the pairing with Rodgers and that defense seemed like a match made in heaven. And it turned out to be a match made in what did you say
In that
elementary
dark
school?
room that he went to
No,
hide in the offseason. I'm sorry.
you could say that too. I was just gonna make the joke about the HE double hockey sticks. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's it.
You didn't want to say a bad word.
Yeah.
But you mentioned DJ Reed. We didn't talk about him. He goes to the Giants to shore up, or not the Giants, the Lions to shore up their secondary because they lost Carlton Davis, who heads to New England. So a lot of pieces moving, a lot more pieces to go. Before we hop out of here, because 5 more moves are going to happen the minute we log off here, because that is what happens on the Couch GMs podcast.
Yep.
Is there any other moves worth mentioning or something you just want to give a shout out to?
Man, I don't think so. I had a whole list here. We went through the whole entire thing. So I'm looking forward to those moves that hit right after we get off the air, but it's been a wild ride. I'm glad we were able to talk about a lot of different players, a lot of different teams, and I'm looking forward to putting a bow on this more on Thursday. Make sure you're tuning in to stick with us as Cody and I'll be able to do a little bit more of an in-depth breakdown with not everything flying around our heads.
Oops, I hit the wrong button. Did you see that?
I did. Oh, I see it still. Look at that.
Sorry, I'm
Technical
trying.
difficulties on Cody's end.
I'm basically Twitter today.
You're still doing better than Twitter.
So, but yeah, no, Thursday's going to be a great show. Hopefully by then we know the whereabouts of some of these big names, whether that's Aaron Rodgers, Kate Johnson, or we do, we'll break it down. Then remember, we are live Thursdays at 6:30 throughout the off season, and then we'll be back twice a week during the regular season. But that is kind of the schedule for now. Hopefully your team is being active. Hopefully you're not sitting out like New Orleans Saints because they got no money. But until next time, which is Thursday, I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kerth. We'll talk to you all then. Oops.